Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today at the Your Overseas Home virtual event and choosing to take the next step towards becoming a French homeowner. Let me ask you this. What's currently stopping you from progressing your plans? Do you find the exchange market intimidating? Don't know sorry, which estate agent to trust, or you're struggling with French law? Well, give me 60 minutes of your time and that will all change. Hi, my name is Rosie, and I'm your host for today's session, where we'll be discussing how to buy in France from making plans to moving in. This morning, we're joined by three experts who each represent an essential service for a safe and secure property purchase in France. It will be great if our guests could give me a little wave when I call on you, and that'd be great. I'm pleased to welcome Danny Cook, account manager, team leader at Smart Currency Exchange. He's helped countless buyers of French property with their international transfers. We're also joined today by Chris Summers, an estate agent at Beauvillage Immobilier, an award-winning estate agent with thousands of properties across southwest France. And last but not least is the lovely Leah Maynard, a lawyer at Buckle Solicitors, a French law firm with English-speaking solicitors who can help you with everything from translations to planning permission. This session will last 60 minutes and we have a lot to get through. If you do have a question, please type your query into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen and I'll ask one of our guests on your behalf. If you do need a reminder of anything discussed today or would like to share this with family and friends, that's absolutely fine. This seminar is being recorded and will be accessible for 30 days on VFairs. So, Danny, it would be great if you could introduce yourself and Smart Currency to our buyers today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rosie. Good morning, everyone. My name's Danny Cook. I work as an account manager and team leader here at Smart Currency Exchange. So we've been around since 2004. We've helped around 50,000 people in that time move currency overseas for property purchases or relocations. We're exclusive currency partners for Rightmove and work with numerous estate agents, solicitors, mortgage brokers to help people with the currency side of things when it comes to buying in France. People often get in touch with us around 6 or 12 months before the exchange. Of course, currency markets can be very volatile, so we're essentially here to help manage the risks people will be exposed to when purchasing property in France.
Lovely, thank you. And Chris, it would be great if you could introduce yourself and Beauvillage.
Yeah, hi, my name's Chris Summers. Good morning, everybody. I work for Beauvillage Immobilier. We specialise in southwest France. We have 22 branches across the southwest of France. We're partners of Savills in this area. Most of you will know Savills in the UK. It's a worldwide brand. I personally have been in property for 36 years and have worked very successfully across France now for the last 5 years. And obviously, we cover everything from viewing trips to finding the house, making the offer, the legal process, changing your utilities, sorting out a bank account for you, the house insurance. We'll hold your hand as a company through the whole process, so nothing is missed, and make sure it all goes swimmingly well.
That's exactly what we're here for. Thanks, Chris. And finally, Leah, how can you help our buyers as a solicitor?
Hi, Rosie. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Leah. I am one of the lawyers with the French team at Buckle Solicitors. We are here to help our buyers with everything to do with the legalities of purchasing in France. This includes obviously reviewing any legal documents that you are asked to sign to make sure they are accurate, that you understand what they say, and that you are comfortable at any point in the process. And obviously, we help coordinating with all of the other professionals that will be advising you through the process.
Fabulous. Thank you, Leah. To all of our viewers, this session will follow a Q&A format, and we'll talk to each guest speaker in turn, and then we'll have time for your own questions. Like I said, if you do have them, pop them in the Q&A box at the bottom. We'll start by learning how to set our budget and manage it effectively. So, Danny, our viewers obviously looking to buy in France are looking at the euro. So, how is the pound to euro at the moment?
Yeah, well, it's been fairly stable, I suppose, over the last couple of months, but generally it's, everything's affecting it really on a day-to-day basis. It can move all over the place very suddenly and unexpectedly. So yeah, really affected by a myriad of direct and indirect economic and political factors. Market sentiment also plays a huge role. So, I mean, just over the last 18 months, to name a few. Political change in the UK, Rishi Sunak, Jeremy Hunt, Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng, to name a few. Of course, political election coming up this year or early next year. Ongoing cost of living crisis. Inflation levels in the UK have been high. Subsequent soaring interest rates. Of course, they're now starting to come down. You've got the Ukraine war, the Gaza conflict. The list goes on and on, really. The impact for 2022, as an example, was 14%, between the highest and lowest rates. So yeah, a lot of things constantly going on, of course, in the world, both politically and economically, that really impact where the exchange rate and the markets are moving on a day by day and hour by hour basis even.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Danny. And why do you recommend that? Well, I know why, but to our viewers, can you share
Yeah.
why we should use a currency specialist rather than, transferring with your bank?
Yeah, so I mean, the main reason I would say, I suppose, people would use us rather than their bank is to obtain a better exchange rate. With a bank, generally, you get a tourist rate of exchange that's going to be several percentage points away from where the actual market is sat. So with us, you're going to get a much better rate of exchange, first and foremost. You also get an account manager with us to assist you through the transaction, hold your hand throughout the whole process. So I would argue that we're offering a higher level of customer service than a bank. You may find when you call a bank, you might be held on hold for a long period of time, speaking to robots and whatnot. So thus, you always get through to your human account manager on the end of the phone to help with that transaction. There's also certain products that we offer that the bank won't, which we might go on to highlight potentially, but things such as forward contracts and order to buys that banks don't offer.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's say I am buying in France. Let's say I want to buy this house right here in the Dordogne. If only. I need to set my budget. But I understand I won't get the pound to euro rate I find on Google.
Yeah, that's correct. Unfortunately, if only we could get that one. But yeah, that's essentially is the exchange rates you see in the news and the newspaper are the rates that large institutional banks making multi-billion dollar trades transact at. So the exchange rates you and I receive as individuals are different. It's slightly lower than the rates you might see in the newspaper or on the news, but it should be, fairly close to it. It will just be slightly underneath it.
Okay, great. And presuming I'm not taking a suitcase of cash, how would I buy a property in France? What's the typical process?
Yeah, so I would say the typical process would be something along the lines of this, I suppose. Step one would be researching your desired location. So of course you want to know where you want to be ultimately. That can take a bit of time, going out on trips, doing recce's where you're not actually potentially viewing properties. You might just be sort of feeling out areas and whatnot. So that's sort of your first step, I suppose, is actually researching that and ultimately deciding where you want to be. Step two would be, again, going on a trip, finding a property, and actually potentially getting to the stage where you put in an offer. So yeah, step four then, once you've got your offer accepted, you've negotiated the price. That would be step four. The price is now agreed. Step five, you've got 3 to 9 months of the purchase process, depending on the complexity. Longer, of course, if you're buying off plan. So that period is really quite a long period of time where you'd be dealing with, the lawyers and the counterparty and getting everything agreed. And then step six would be actually completing on the property.
Sorry. And at what point in that process should I be considering currency?
So I would say the earlier the better, really. It's best to engage with a currency specialist once you've made the decision that overseas property ownership is something you want to do. This will help you, well, they'll help you to understand your budget in both currencies, explain to you currency risk, and help you agree your currency plan. The crucial piece here, I would say, is to have your currency plan agreed before you actually go on that viewing trip. Once you find your dream property, you then simply just need to execute that plan, and this allows you to focus on the property purchase journey in that period of time that can be, as I say, very elongated between offer acceptance and completion.
Okay, thank you. And when talking about make foreign exchange and overseas property purchases. I hear the phrase currency risk a lot. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as I sort of touched on there, basically from the moment your offer is accepted in France, you are then exposed to currency risk. Currency rates are moving every second of every day, as we kind of touched on earlier. So between the date that your offer is accepted and your completion, again, that time could be anywhere from 3 to 9 months, or again longer if it's an off-plan property. So say you've agreed a price of 250,000 euros, for example, and on that day, let's just say off the top of my head, it's equating to £220,000. Again, you know, your completion day is 6 months away. So on completion day, your agreed price in euros is of course still 250,000. However, the price in pounds, again, just, you know, off the top of my head, off a substantial movement in that space of time, it could increase to £245,000, let's say, just from an exchange rate changing and moving against you. So that could be, you know, an extra £25,000 on a budget of that size. That movement over the 6 month period in this example is currency risk. And that's actually, you know, kind of real-time examples. We have seen moments before in the markets where the rates moved about 10% in a 6 month period of time. So these are, you know, very real risks and something that can happen where, you know, the cost of the property to you in pounds can increase by 25,000 just because of a currency rate changing and moving against you, dependent on whatever's happening in the world at that time.
Thanks, Danny. That's really good to know. So what are the different transfer options that Smart Currency offers?
So we can, of course, help you in any event, really. There's a multitude of different routes you can go down. One of the most popular ones we have is a forward contract where you're actually locking in the exchange rate. Often that's done at the point of offer accepted, to actually then secure the euro cost in sterling. You can also just look at simple spot contracts where you just call us up, you know, 5-10 minutes on the phone to get an exchange booked in, and we can flip the transfer in 24 hours for you. So you could, for example, just do that for your deposit and that for your balance if you weren't actually worried about currency risk and you thought, I'll just wait and see what happens with the market. So I just want to take the risk kind of thing. I want to stick that 25 grand on red or black and, you know, hope it goes in my favor. Probably wouldn't be what a lot of people do, but some people don't mind the gamble. But then you've got products like forward contracts where you're actually locking in the exchange rate. So to be honest, that's probably the route most of my clients go down, is actually locking in the rate with the forward contract, which is probably the most popular product that we have.
Okay. How long can you lock in that rate with a forward contract?
So you can do that generally for any time up to a year. Again, most of my clients would probably look at doing that at the point of offer accepted, because then you've got a very real sort of currency risk on the table. You've got a very real exposure that you need to, you know, strongly consider and decide what you want to do with in the currency markets. So yeah, some people may decide that actually they see an exchange rate and they think, right, I'm just going to lock this in before my trips because I want to know what my budgets are. But a lot of people are actually considering that at the point of offer accepted, I would say.
Okay, yeah, that sounds clever. And what happens, let's say I've locked in an exchange rate with my forward contract and heaven forbid the purchase falls through, what would happen then?
So, I mean, we of course deal with thousands of property buyers every year. This does happen from time to time. Talk to us and we would work with you to extend that contract to meet a new completion date. So the contracts are flexible and we always work with our clients in that sense of the word to help them if worse does comes to worse.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. And sorry, just having a look at my script quickly. And what can our buyers find at your booth in the exhibition hall?
Yeah, wealth of resources you can find there. You can speak to an account manager there to discuss your currency requirements if you so please. You can browse our services online, request a free quote, much more on there. I do recommend as well that you download our free buyer's guide to currency. Again, that's free to do, and that's under our resources tab. So you can find more information there if you feel there's anything that hasn't been covered here that you want to read more about, of course.
Oh, thanks, Danny. Some great advice there. Now let's speak to our property expert, Chris. I believe Beauvillage specialises in southwest France. Can you tell with us the current state of the market? Is it possible to find a bargain?
Yeah, absolutely. Things have changed. Also been a lot of TV programs of people buying French houses and doing them up.
Mhm.
And that over the last 5 years has caused a flood of people to buy them. But yeah, they're still around. You can probably get a very tired sort of 2-bed cottage style house in a hamlet that would need internal renovation, and you could probably get one of those for 45,000, depending which part of southwest France. You pay more if you go further south of southwest France, down further to the Dordogne. I'm in the Haute-Vienne. We're a bit cheaper than the Dordogne, but certainly in the Haute-Vienne you can get a cottage that will need renovating for 45,000, and you could probably pick up a really nice old barn in its own grounds, maybe a couple of acres, which needs full renovation, and we're talking everything, but probably a beautiful building. And you probably get one of those for 50, 60,000 that you would then get planning done and turn into your dream home. And you can get properties that probably don't need as much work, more updating rather than renovating. And again, you could probably get a nice 2-bed that probably needs more decoration, kitchen fitted, that sort of thing, rather than big jobs. And you probably get one of those for sort of 55, 60,000. And 3 beds you probably get for sort of 85, 90,000 that just need generic updating, nothing major to do. Most things you could probably do yourself. And of course, you can still get some larger houses. You don't get so many chateaus to do up now because most of those have been purchased thanks to the TV. But yeah, you can get some nice bigger houses that, again, it's all relative. If you're buying a 3 or 4 bed detached that is kind of 50% done, it's all relative in the price. But yeah, if you look around and keep an eye on the websites and keep an eye on Beauvillage website, all new properties go live daily, so you'll see them pop up.
Yeah, definitely. Just when you mentioned there about the kind of cottages that come with a lot of land, I have really noticed that in France especially, they tend to come with like barns and outhouses that you could definitely convert.
Yeah, it's not for everybody. If it's a holiday home, you don't really want too much land because otherwise you just spend your whole weekend here doing the garden.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're coming here permanently and you're happy to be a bit more rural, then you can get some lovely houses with fantastic land and outbuildings for conversion if you need them. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. And in terms of people looking to buy in France, what stage of, being ready to buy do you recommend they get in contact with you?
I think most people tend to start their search probably a year before they're looking to kind of maybe come out and move. That sounds a long time, but people do that, and I think the best use of that time is to find the right area. We all know France is vast; it's a vast, vast country, and I think sometimes when people are looking at viewings and where should they view, they see these 5, 6 houses and think they're probably sort of 20 minutes apart, but they're probably 2 hours apart. So I think finding the area is crucial. Use that first 6, 7 months of that year to find the right area. Ideally a couple of towns you like, and then maybe look in a 20 kilometer circle of that town. It will make it much easier when you come to book viewings if you're centering on one or 2 locations rather than looking in the whole of the Haute-Vienne or the whole of the Dordogne. It's going to be very hard to find a house. So, and then maybe contact us probably a month, 6 weeks before you're planning to come out and start showing the properties you're interested in, and then we'll start liaising with you and talk about those houses and start getting viewing trips booked for you and set up.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And what would you say that people should budget for buying costs in France?
Yeah, it will vary, but in the main, I'd probably allow around 10% of whatever the purchase price is for notaire and taxes. Could vary a little bit, but on average, around 10% of the purchase price. Obviously, if you're buying for renovation and you've got an idea of what you think that renovation budget is, I would double that and have that in the pot. It's very easy to get overwhelmed here doing renovations. And we all know if you've done renovations in the UK, sometimes you come against a problem you didn't foresee. So I'd always say if you think it's going to cost you 40,000 euro to renovate, add 40,000 on again, make sure you've got that budget, then nothing's going to surprise you and you can comfortably renovate and be within your budget, which is crucial.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And would you say those costs are the same, or do they change if you're buying a new build property?
Yeah, pretty similar. The taxes and no-tear fees are payable on all the properties, and I'm sure Leah will tell us more about that later. But I think obviously with a new build, if you buy in a new build house, your running costs of that house might be cheaper because it will be fully up to date with insulation, the correct heating, it'll be very efficient. So the running cost of that house may be cheaper than a rural house, but the basic buying cost won't be drastically different.
Okay, that's good to know. And at Beauvillage, are you able to assist buyers with viewing trips?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a crucial part of what we do. Ideally, we get your final viewing list about 2 weeks before you're due out. Bear in mind, properties sell and the market's busy, so things can sell quite quickly. For me, with my clients, I tend to say 2 weeks before you're due out, send me your final list of the ones you want to view, and it's our job then to get a whole plan set up for those sort of 2-3 days, however long you're here. We'll get those set up and we'll plan those trips for you, and you'll know exactly where you've got to be on what time, where you're meeting myself or my colleagues, and we'll have that whole time mapped out for you.
Okay, great. Do you have any tips for buyers looking to schedule a viewing trip? So, how long would you recommend? Do you recommend staying in a hotel or in the heart of town?
I think if you're going to come for 3 to 5 days, is probably a good time to come out. I'd maybe stay in a gîte somewhere, give you a feeling of France. If you want to be right near facilities and you want to be able to walk to things in the evening when you finished your viewings, then obviously staying in a town is a good idea. But I think a car is an absolute essential because it's a vast place and you're going to need a car. A lot of people drive over anyway and get used to that drive and see how it is. But I think normally you'd probably if you're viewing at 5 or 6 properties, you view those over the first couple of days. Don't do more than 4 a day. So don't try and squeeze more than that in because it's quite a process viewing houses and can be quite a distance. And I'll say the last couple of days to book your second viewings. So you do your first viewings over the first couple of days, and the second ones you want to go back again to, I would do that in the last couple of days and keep that time for those. But don't try and cram too much in because it's top. Believe it or not, it's tiring viewing houses. You're traveling between each one, an hour at each house. It's tiring. So give yourself time to relax on the trip as well.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose it could probably be quite easy to get overwhelmed, and if you're viewing so many, it can be hard to remember, is that the one with the kitchen I liked,
Exactly, yeah. We will give you, when we meet you at each house, we'll give you a brochure for each house. So you have them to go away with. So you'll be able to recall things as you sit down in your hotel in the evening and review which ones you've seen. But just don't cram too much in. You enjoy it more if you don't cram them in.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. And before a viewing trip, is there anything that buyers have to show to their estate agent on entire? I know some agencies require proof of funds.
Yeah, when you view properties with us, you'll be asked to find a bond de visite, which is basically a document confirming that should you buy through us or view anything through us, you will pay any fees that are due for that property. And the next process is really you view, you find when you make your offer. Before you make your offer, we will ask you to provide proof of funding. If it's cash, we'll ask for a bank statement. If it's in a pension account or something like that, we'll ask for proof of that and make sure it can be withdrawn in time for a purchase. If you're taking a mortgage, which some people do, we want to see proof of a mortgage offer that you've got that funding in place. And it just saves a lot of, we don't want to get 2 months down the process for everybody and then find out at the last minute the buyer can't buy the property. It's not good for either buyer or seller. So we will ask for substantiation of funds, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, fab. Thank you. I know you've got some recent property sales you can share with us and their prices. So I'll hand over to you.
Okay. Yeah, you might not see these very well, but just an idea that I'll try and show these. This is a 2-bedroom cottage, 90% renovated, just a few minor things left to do. This sold for 65,000 in the end, this house.
Oh, wow.
Really lovely. It's got about 2,000 square meters of garden. This was rural. This was probably a 15-minute drive to any facilities, but that's the sort of thing you can get if you want a bit of peace and quiet. That's perfect for you.
Am I right? That one was in Bellac?
Yes, that's in Bellac. Yeah. This one's about 50. It's a place called Chambray. This is a bit different. This is a fully renovated 3 to 4 bed cottage. Beautiful. It's got a beautiful entertainment and bar room at the bottom of the garden. It's got an acre of garden surrounded by woodland and a wood-fired hot tub, I'd like to add as well. You get with this one. And this one's 174,000, but this one's 3 to 4 bed, 3 bathroom, all done. Really lovely location. So that's the sort of thing you can get for that. This one here, this raises the bar again. This one is actually a little hamlet. This is 4 houses, all in a row. You can see the air shot there. This one's 256,000. It's 2 1-beds and 2 2-bedroom houses. And it's great if you work with visas and that now, it's good to be able to show an income. So you can easily live in one and rent the others out, or you could have family come over, parents, and live in the other house and rent the others out. But it's got some lovely gardens, and that's only about a mile from a town as well, a kilometre from the town. So, and we push it up the other end. This one is a small chateau. This one's 460,000, I think. This one's a small chateau. Get a bit closer, you can see that. 6 bedrooms, 4 receptions, on at 450. This one's sold now, unfortunately. You can't have this one. But beautiful gardens, beautiful location. But this is, that sort of thing is available, and that's about 15 minutes from facilities in the country. But there's a wide range of properties here, and just do your research. Have a look on all the websites and contact the agent. Work with an agent that's communicating well. You don't want to be working with an agent that's not coming back to you, because it really makes it hard. So make sure someone's communicating well, and ideally with myself, once we start communicating, I set up a WhatsApp with that client, and most of it's then done on WhatsApp because it's nice and quick and easy.
Yeah, super handy as well. So you're not having to call international numbers, and things can get a bit confusing, can't they?
Yeah.
What was I going to ask? That property that had the 4 in a row,
Yeah.
let's say I'm the lucky buyer of it, if only. And how easy would it be to convert that into a gîte? Gîte, sorry.
Yeah, most of them are ready to go. All those are renovated. All 4 of those are ready to use. They've all been done. So that whole estate is ready to let. If you wanted to live in one and let them, they're all ready to go. They're furnished as well. They come fully furnished. So you literally can have an income from day one with something like that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's quite a good segue into Leah, our solicitor. So Leah, this isn't a prepared question, so sorry if this is off the cuff.
No, that's fine. Go for it.
How easy is it to get the necessary legal bits out of the way for a gîte?
So it is going to depend a lot on which area of France you are in. France, as some viewers will find out, is quite a heavily regulated country in terms of what you can and can't do with your property. But that is one of the reasons why it's just so nice to live there, because you do always have this reassurance that nobody is going to turn your next door property into a club or a pub or anything like that. So in terms of a gîte, the recommendation is always to have your first stop being the local mairie, because they will have all of the information at hand in terms of what application you need to make. Very often, there will need to be an application. You can't just come and turn your property into a gîte without any kind of legalities in place. Sometimes it will just be an application when you declare that you are setting up this type of business. Sometimes you will actually need an authorization, which will take a couple of months to come through. So in terms of the legalities, the first thing to do is check what you need. And then what we can do is we can put then a condition in your contract. For example, if your dream is to have a gîte, and that is the reason you're buying this property, we can have your purchase be subject to obtaining the relevant planning permission and authorization for you to be able to use the property as a gîte.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you. And kind of backtracking a little bit, at what point in the buying process do you recommend buyers reach out to you?
So your lawyer, you really need them towards the end of your finding process. Once you have your property and once you're ready to make an offer, that's when you want to start setting things up with the lawyer. Obviously, we need to agree fees, we need to open a file, etc. But very often you will be asked to sign a formal offer document. Offers are always a bit of a gray area in terms of legal documents, but sometimes they can commit you. Sometimes there could be a fine if you don't complete within a certain amount of time. And obviously they do set the tone for the entire transaction. So you want to make sure that they are properly set up and that everything that is important to you that you might not have thought should go in an offer should actually be in there. So that's why you talk to your lawyer. We have a good conversation so that we can really understand what your plans are for the property, and we can make sure that all the legal paperwork is accurate from the start.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And can you explain to our viewers the key contracts and stages of buying in France? So let's start logically with the compromis de vente.
So obviously, first thing you sign is an offer. And then afterwards, what will happen is that either the estate agency or the notaire is going to draft the preliminary contract. Your preliminary contract can take several forms. Compromis de vente is one of the popular ones, and otherwise you would have another type of contract called a promesse de vente, which is a promise to sell and buy. A compromis de vente is called a private contract, which means that it can be done by an estate agency. You can do remote signatures. It's quite cool. It's nice and quick. A promesse de vente is signed in front of a notaire, so it's a bit heavier in terms of formalities, but at the same time, it's a more often solid type of contract. And for buyers, they need to be aware that every type of contract comes with different features. So especially in terms of the seller being committed, if they don't go through with the completion, some contracts are easier to enforce rather than other ones. So all of this is something to take into consideration.
Okay, thank you. And if I'm asked to sign a document for a small reservation deposit, am I safe to do that?
I think it would be quite unusual in France for you to have to pay a deposit, a reservation deposit. I've actually not come across it in a couple of years. The way things would work in France is that your deposit is only due after you have signed your formal preliminary contract, and obviously this will set out, you know, your either 5-10% deposit and the deadline by which it has to be paid. So if you are asked to pay a reservation deposit, I would say that's a bit of a, not a red flag, but that's something that you would really want
Quite
a lawyer
rare.
to look through, because you need to make sure that whoever is holding your money is actually accredited to do so. Not everyone is. Estate agencies especially need a special accreditation, a special bank account to be allowed to hold deposits. And obviously you want to make sure that you are aware of the conditions to get your money back. So that's something that you would need to be extremely careful about if you were asked to pay a reservation deposit.
Okay, fab, thank you. And do I need to be in France to finalize the sale, or can I do that, you know, by power of attorney?
It is always possible to do a French transaction using a power of attorney that you could sign either a paper one in the UK. A lot of notaires now are starting to be more modern. We can use DocuSign, which works really quite well. What I would say, however, is that when you are buying a property, very often what will happen is you are in France, you make your offer, it's accepted, then you go back to the UK because obviously you were only there for a short amount of time, and we would usually sign your preliminary contract remotely. But for the transfer deed on completion, we would always say that this should ideally be signed in person. That's because you should always go and check the property the day before or the morning of completion, just to make sure that, you know, there are no broken windows, the seller hasn't left a mess in the garage, which does happen quite often, just to make sure that everything is as it should be for completion, because that's not something you want to find out 2 weeks after completion. Once you've got your keys, you go to the property, you're like, actually, no, there are so many issues, because it becomes a lot harder to fix, if not impossible to fix.
Yeah, of course. Okay, thank you. And how long does the process typically take from, you know, signing your initial contract to keys in hand?
So from signing preliminary contract to completion, this will actually be set out in the contracts. That's a feature that is extremely different from England, where usually you would exchange and complete within a very short amount of time. In France, you would sign your preliminary contract extremely early in the process. Ideally, I would say around 3 weeks after your offer is accepted, just because contracts have to be drafted, which takes a fair amount of time. Once you've signed your preliminary contract, the standard would be 3 months from signature of the preliminary contract to completion. The completion that will be put in the contract is a deadline. It's not your actual completion date. So that, again, something that's quite different from England that you have to be quite aware of. A lot of the timing for a property transaction in France depends on whether there is a preemption right. So that's something where the local authority has to be told this property is being sold for this price. And very often in France, they will have a right to say, actually, this is a property that I want for my local authority portfolio. You know, either because we have an agricultural policy, lots of land, we want that land, or because you've got social housing policy, you know, something that happens in cities. If this happens, as a buyer, unfortunately, you can't do anything, but very often the local authority will have 2 months to consider and make a decision, and very often they will simply leave the time to lapse without saying anything. So you will always have those 2 months. If you need a mortgage, then 3 months is absolutely recommended, just because it takes quite a while to get the bank in order. Once you get your mortgage offer, you have to wait 10 days before you can accept it. So all of those really take some time. But from the moment you make your offer to the moment you complete, I think on average would be around 4 months.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. I will just let everyone who might have just joined since we started, you can ask questions in this session. Just pop them in the Q&A section in the bottom, and this session is being recorded, so you can watch it on demand later on. Okay, so I know in France it's not as common, it's really uncommon actually, to get a buyer's report done, so like a property survey. Is that right? Do you recommend that they get one anyway?
So yeah, again, one of the quite different features from when you purchase in England, and one of the things that your lawyer can talk to you about, is that in France you will be provided with some surveys, but there won't be structural surveys. There will be, for example, about the state of the electrics or whether there are any asbestos at the property, and it's all for information only, in that your seller does not have to make good on any of the issues. As a buyer, in terms of a structural survey, it is something that you can do. There are actually now a fair amount of English RICS surveyors that have set up in France to offer this type of service, and it will really depend on the type of property you're purchasing. Obviously, if you're purchasing, an old barn in an area that has subsidence issues, then it's quite good to have your surveyor have a look at it. Likewise, if you're buying a property that's been completely renovated, ideally you may want a surveyor to make sure that the building work has been done to a good standard, because obviously when you check a property, it's all been done, it looks brand new, etc. But then your surveyor can tell you actually they did a really shoddy work with electrics, and that's something that you would only find after completion, where you really can't fix it anymore. So it is possible to get your survey. The one issue is that because it is unusual, you cannot make your purchase subject to satisfactory survey, because it basically just gives you a get out of a free card, which is not acceptable with the French purchasing process. So if that's something you want, ideally put it in your offer. And then what will have to happen is either you have to get the survey done before you sign your preliminary contract, or you need to get the results of your survey within your 10 days cooling off period, at which point you can withdraw for any reason that you want. Afterwards, you are likely to be stuck in the process, in that even if your survey comes up with issues, you can't renegotiate, you can't withdraw without losing your deposit. So it's really something that you have to make a decision about extremely early in the process.
Okay, fab, thank you. So if I find a property that requires renovation, can you advise me with planning permissions? And is it typically easy to get planning permission in France?
Planning permission in France is a very French process, in that it can take absolutely ages, with a lot of hoops to jump through. Again, first port of call is the mairie. You always want to get along with the mairie anyway, because it can make your life very difficult otherwise, and they will be able to tell you what are the planning rules applicable to this specific plot of land. And obviously, France is very proud of its heritage. It's very proud of the way their beautiful villages look, etc., which means that there will be restriction in terms of planning permission. If you want your shutters to be pink, that might not be allowed. We don't help in terms of applying for planning permission, so we can recommend companies who are completely functional in France, who assist British buyers with their planning permission. However, what we can do is obviously talk to you, understand how important this planning permission is for you, and then what we can do is reword all of the conditions in the contract to make your purchase subject to you obtaining the planning permission. Very often, the one that's quite important is a swimming pool. So you've got a large plot of land, you visit, estate agent says, oh, you could have a hot tub, or you could have a swimming pool. And then obviously you get really keen, like, yes, I do want a swimming pool here because it's nice and hot, and we want to spend our holidays in the swimming pool. But then you need to get this planning permission to make sure that you can get the swimming pool. So, and it does add a fair amount of months in the process. I would say easily 3 to 6 months. In addition, because what you will want ideally is what we call a fully purged planning permission, in that not only you've had your permission, but you've displayed it on the property and nobody has objected to it, and all the time to make objection has run out, in that you are 100% sure that this planning permission will not be contested at any point.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. And how much should buyers typically benchmark for legal fees buying in France?
So buying in France, we have got a set of regulated fees. They are colloquially called notaire fees, which is actually really unfair to notaire because they don't get that much money out of it. As Chris said, you should budget between 8 and 10% of your purchase price to pay for those. In terms of if you want to involve an English solicitor, because it's not a mandatory part of the process, it's really an add-on. Our fees are not built in within the notaire fees, the purchase fees, and usually would start at £5,000. But obviously, we would always talk to our client, discuss whether they want a time basis work or whether we can agree to a fixed fee to have like a nice set budget, which is really quite comforting to have. And something to know as well in France is that the marketing price that you see on the website of the agencies is usually expressed what they call FAI, which means agencies fees included. So the price that you see is the price that you pay for the property, then you budget another 8 to 10% on top of that. That's your actual French legal fees, and then you've got your solicitors fees that are also on top of that.
Okay, fab. Thank you. And I've got one last question for you. If I plan to rent out my property, perhaps for buying a second home or a holiday property, can you advise if the process differs at all, or if there are any further hurdles that people might have to jump over?
A lot of it will depend on the type of property that you're purchasing. Usually with a house, it should be fine to do holiday lets. So a lot of places in France now are really cracking down on Airbnb type lettings because they feel that it just doesn't match what they want for the atmosphere, for their village, etc. So again, that's something that we can look into. You speak to the mairie to have a good understanding of things. If you are buying an apartment in a town or in a city, then you also have to look at your buildings regulations, which is one of the legal documents we would review for you, because sometimes there can be restrictions for the building itself, or sometimes there are no restrictions. So it's always good to know for you whether you will have to deal with lots of tenants coming and going, or whether you can have your own tenants for your holiday lets. One thing to be aware of, however, is that if you are making a rental income from your property in France, it is considered French source income, which means that you have to declare it both in England, where you live, and in France, where you are making the income. And then you get into very complicated double taxation, treaties, etc. So it does add a layer of complexity in terms of, it's not just you get your income back in the UK and you declare it in the UK. No, you have an obligation to declare it in France as well.
Okay. And you have to declare that in both France and England, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. I'll come back to Chris on this next question because I forgot to ask you. Leah, what can our viewers find at your booth in the exhibition hall?
So we have a free guide to purchasing in France, which is really, really focused on the legalities of it. So it explains to you all the types of contracts, the pitfalls to look out for in the contracts, you know, how legally committed you are, whether your deposit is ever at risk. There is also some advice on the booth in terms of ownership structure and estate planning, because obviously when you buy a property in a country like France, when the inheritance rules are quite different, very often that's something that you might want to take into consideration as well. We have had clients who are living in France come to us for advice about wills and inheritance tax, and then they find out that actually it doesn't work at all the way they want, and now they're moving back to England because they just cannot, you know, bear the process the way the French are going to tax things. So all of that can be found on the booth. And then, of course, I will be on the booth until 4 p.m. today. And we've got a chat, and you can just come and ask me any questions that you want. I'll be very happy to cover those as well.
Lovely, thank you. And same question to Chris.
Yeah, we'll have some agents on there who can discuss your property needs and give you an idea of the sort of thing you might get. Advice about the process of selling and buying from start to finish. People to take your questions. No question's a silly one. Just ask them. There's never a silly question when buying in France. It's important that if something's nagging at you, ask the question. Costs, advice on the costs. And of course, we'll have lots of property details there, and you can register with Beauvillage as a buyer as well at the booth, and then you'll be passed to one of the agents in the area you're looking to buy, and then they'll pick you up afterwards and contact you and make sure you get property requirements taken off from there.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. Now we've got some time for questions from the audience, so feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A, or you can head to their booth, our guest speakers' booths after this call. So this first question is probably Danny and Chris, whoever gets there first. When looking at properties, for example, on Rightmove or on your overseas home or on Beauvillage, is the exchange rate displayed typically accurate? So I know on your overseas home, we have it in euros and then we have it in pounds.
Yeah, so same on Rightmove. You can choose which currency you want it displayed in on Rightmove. But Danny, probably better to answer the question.
Yeah, might be one for me. Yeah, I don't know. So basically, yeah, I would say it's going to be based off the market rate, which I sort of touched on earlier, which is, the rate that banks are basically trading currency at. So it's not the rate you'll be able to obtain. It is going to be accurate in the sense that it's not going to be totally left field. It will be, more or less correct, but you want to build a buffer of, depending on the volume of the transaction, a couple thousand probably at least, to account for the fact that they're likely based on that off the market rate, which again isn't a rate that's achievable for URI.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Okay, and Terence has asked, at the point a buyer locks in a rate with you on a forward contract, how does that work? Do they transfer the money to you? He says he's thinking of a situation where the purchase is dependent on freeing up capital from a UK home for sale.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, so basically you don't transfer the whole amount when you're booking a forward contract. You actually just transfer 5% of the sterling cost within 3 working days if one is booked. So basically, let's say if you'd been out today, right, you had an offer accepted, you think, right, I want to lock in a forward contract. How it actually works is we would buy the euros in full off the market for you to lock the exchange rate in. You would have to pay over 5% of the total sterling cost within 3 working days. So let's say, again, if it was 250,000 euros and the sterling cost for that was 220,000 pounds, you pay over 11,000 pounds of that within 3 working days to lock the rate. And then the rest of the sterling, we would set a valid date on the contract that we would tend to marry up to your timeframes in France. So let's say if you were completing in France end of June, for example, that would be then probably the value date we'd set on the forward contract. And then that would be the day by which you'd need to send over the rest of the sterling. And then the euros, the pre-purchased euros, can actually be paid out on, before, or indeed after that date. So you can have them hold and file that if there's any sort of delays in France. But yeah, that's where the forward contract is very useful, because it's perfect in that scenario where you're waiting for a house sale to go through and you're not going to have the funds until kind of that last minute. You can still put yourself in a position where you've guaranteed your exchange rate, guaranteed that you're not going to be affected by any drops in the rate, and basically guaranteed that you'll know exactly what the euros are going to cost you in sterling come completion, and when your house sale does ultimately go through. So yeah, it's just 5% generally of the total sterling cost is what you need to actually secure a forward contract.
Okay,
just
thank
you. On that quickly, Rosie, sorry, when I bought my last house in France, I went through smart currency, and money isn't my thing. I don't know much about that, but my wife's in banking, so she was very quick to lock in a rate. And I think by the time we offered to when we bought, it was almost we saved about £5,000.
Oh wow!
And that was over a 4-month period. So it really does work. It can make it just it's peace of mind, and it does. If it's fluctuating, it's peace of mind to secure it. And we saved a good just over £5,000. I think we saved.
Yeah, I think I've heard that from quite a few people. I mean, I was talking to Danny before we went live, and I think we were saying it's about 10% a year that it varies. So yeah, if you were looking at a 200 grand house, I don't know, like once you've got your legal fees on top of that, it could really make a bit of a difference.
That's another thing you can actually build it. So just jump on that. You can build in your legal fees to the forward contract. So most of my clients, when they're booking the forward contract, would have the euro amount, including all of their agents and lawyers' fees and whatnot, so that you can then have that all secured and everything's then sort of done and dusted for you, basically.
That's good to know. Thank you.
If I can just touch on quickly on the point of the question of selling your property in France, selling your property in England to free up your capital to buy in France. You have to be extremely careful when you do that, because the French will not let you make your property purchase in France subject to you selling your property in England. And that's simply because the French feels that the UK conveyancing process is just completely haphazard, with no guarantee of when or if it will actually complete, which means that we have had situations where, the buyer committed in the full expectations that they had found a buyer in England and they would be able to have their house sold by the time they completed in France. And it fell through once, it fell through twice, and it got extremely, extremely stressful. And at the end of the day, you could absolutely lose your deposit in a situation like this, especially if your seller is French. They will simply not understand what is going on in England, and they will feel it is too risky. So if that's what you're planning to do, you can, of course, try and do it, but you should make your lawyer aware so that we can try and protect you as much as possible. But there could be a scenario where, even with protections put in place, if your sale in England falls through a couple of times, which does happen, it would completely jeopardize your French purchase.
Okay, thanks for that, Leah. Okay, our next question is from Nick, and it's to Chris. Is there a significant price gap between the south of France and, say, the north of the country? And he's compared it to the UK market.
Yeah, definitely. It can vary a bit. You could. Well, I'm in Southwest here, and some of the houses we have here would be probably a similar price to Normandy, but it would vary on the house type and where it is. But obviously, if you go further south beyond the Dordogne down towards Provence, you're in much higher price band. The weather's much warmer. It's warmer for longer. Southwest is very warm. We have long summers, short winters, but obviously the further south you go, the more expensive it will get, without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the same in cities as well?
Yeah, it's a bit like the UK. London, it's a certain price. If you buy in Birmingham, those same sort of price properties will be cheaper. And it's the same as you go around France. The bigger, buzzy cities will be very expensive. The smaller cities might not be so expensive. So, but obviously the capital, Paris, is very similar to London, and same as cities in the UK, where they all vary.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Chloe is asking, Leah, if you declare income in France and the UK, does it mean you have to pay tax twice?
I'm not an income tax specialist, but the principle is there is a double tax treaty between France and England, which means that you can deduct your tax paid in France from your tax that you would have to pay in the UK. You will always have to pay the French tax, and then it's a matter of imputing it on the English tax. The short end of it is that you will not be able to manage that yourself. You will need a dual qualified accountant to do it for you.
Okay, thank you. I will say we are joined today by Chase Buchanan. So if you do have any tax specific questions, hit them up in their booth in the exhibition hall, and they'll definitely be able to help you. Okay, Heidi has asked to Leah again, are the rules for buying property in France different if you have an EU passport than if you're a UK passport holder?
No, absolutely not. France doesn't have any type of restriction who can and can't purchase in France. Having an EU passport doesn't make the process any quicker. And in terms of obtaining a mortgage, if you are not yourself French resident, it's just a nightmare. It won't matter if you've got an EU passport or not. Like I'm UK resident, I would not be able at the moment to get a mortgage in France, despite being a French national myself. So it doesn't make the process harder. It doesn't make the process easier. Where it changes is obviously how much time you will be able to spend in France. I'm not an immigration specialist. I believe we do have a firm who helps with visa application, etc., who is attending the event today. But that's obviously something to think about. Personally, I've never heard of any of my clients being denied a visa. They have complaints that it takes ages, it's very faffy, you have to jump through so many hoops, etc. But everybody that I know applied for a visa ultimately was able to obtain one. Very sadly, the French were going to pass a law a couple of months ago, which would allow British owners of French properties to automatically be able to stay at least 6 months in France without the need to apply for a visa. Unfortunately, it was deemed to be unconstitutional because the British were being favored over other countries. So it did not go through. But obviously, I think it's quite a demonstration that the French are still keen for British people to come and buy in France and spend time there. So we still love each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do know there are still the French equivalent of MPs. It's just falling out my head what they're called, but I know they're still campaigning for that second home tax and second home visa. So maybe one day. Okay, that is about all we've got time for today. Thank you to all of our experts for your tips and advice. To all of our viewers, we do strongly recommend you get in touch with our experts directly to discuss your requirements in detail. Beauvillage Smart Currency Exchange and Buckle Solicitors will all be available at their booths in the exhibition hall. Should you have any more questions, I encourage you head over there now to book a 15-minute chat about your requirements and find out how our experts can help you on your French property journey. So thank you for joining us, Chris, Leah, Danny. To our viewers, we encourage you to take full advantage of our platform, speak to our exhibitors, check out the remaining seminars, and make sure that if you add any of these fabulous resources to your goodie bag, that you email it to yourself before you log off. Thanks again to our guest speakers, and happy property hunting.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Au revoir, bye.
Cheers. Bye.